And I will go ahead and introduce our speaker, Cindy Elliser. She already introduced herself a little bit and told you a little bit about herself. But Cindy has a lot of college degrees, not just one, in biology. And she studied dolphins in the Bahamas for 10 years. And now she's been over here in the Salish Sea studying porpoises for almost 10 years now, right?
Yeah.
She's been learning some really cool things about porpoises that live here. So we're very, very happy that she's agreed to join us today and teach us about them. So let's all welcome Cindy. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much. I always enjoy talking about porpoises, of course. So always happy to chat and discuss. And I hope you guys enjoy the presentation. I'm going to tell you some fun facts about the different types of porpoises we have here in the Salish Sea. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing I always like to start off with is knowing what the difference is between a porpoise and a dolphin, right? Because they are different, and sometimes they get, some people, dolphin and porpoise get used kind of interchangeably. People use the same word, but they're actually different, in different taxonomic families. So we
Cindy,
have 7.
Sorry, can I interrupt for just a second? I just want to make sure, is it just me or are people not seeing the presentation right now?
Is it not
We're just
showing?
seeing a black screen, and I don't know if it's something to do with, yeah, all we're seeing is a black screen, but
oh, that's
it looks
weird.
like the people in person are seeing it.
It's
okay.
also black.
Is that correct? So I don't know if it has something to do with the hybrid.
Settings.
We're just seeing a black screen too.
Is that better?
No, maybe stop sharing and try again.
Yeah, that's odd.
It showed up initially and then it went away.
And then it went away? Oh, that's weird.
Yeah. So give it another try and let's see if it works this time.
See, why do I have 2 different? You know what I'm going to do?
There we go. That looks good.
That might have been a problem.
We've got you now.
Oh, got it? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And you're seeing it okay over at the Whale Center?
Yes, we are. Sorry, I walked away with the mic.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, you're good to go. Thank you,
Okay,
Cindy.
good. Always fun with technology. Okay, so where was I? So porpoises and dolphins are different. So we have 7 species of porpoises and we have 38 different species of dolphins, or a rough about. They're still kind of unsure about the total number as we learn more about genetics and stuff with that. I see, make sure this was moving through. So one of the first things that you'll notice about the difference between the two different types of animals is that dolphins, we're going to look at their dorsal fin because that's the thing that you see the most of the time when you're looking at marine mammals in the water, or dolphins or porpoises. So the dolphins have a curved dorsal fin, or it's called falcate, and porpoises have a triangular dorsal fin, so a little bit more shark-like. So that's the most obvious difference. If you're looking at their face, you can see I have Pacific white-sided dolphins on the right-hand side and harbor porpoise on the left-hand side. These are 2 different species that we have here in the Salish Sea. The dolphins will usually have a beak or a rostrum. Their mouth kind of comes out in a little snout, and the porpoises don't have that. So most dolphins have that feature. Of course, orcas don't have that feature, even though they technically are dolphins, but most dolphin species do. But all porpoise species have that more blunt face, or without that little mouth sticking out. If you looked inside their mouth, if you ever got the chance to do that, you would see that they actually have different shaped teeth. So porpoises have spade-shaped teeth and dolphins have cone-shaped teeth. And the last thing is the behavior. So porpoises, as I'm going to talk about, are a bit more solitary. They are by themselves or in smaller groups and not as kind of playful at the surface. Dolphins love to bow ride and they wake ride and they jump out of the water. They're been found in groups from 5 to 10 to 50 to 1,000. So much more what's called gregarious. So there's just more of them hanging out with each other all the time. And porpoises are a bit more solitary. They like to be smaller groups. So for the porpoises we have here in the Salish Sea, we have 2. we have the Dall's porpoise and we have the harbor porpoise. So the Dall's porpoise looks like people kind of get it mistaken sometimes for a baby orca because it has that same kind of black and white coloration, but it's not. It's actually a porpoise. And these guys are they're the black and white, and then we have the harbor porpoises, and they're just kind of like this dark gray, kind of grayish brown color. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these species, but we know a little bit more about harbor porpoises from the work that we've been doing the last few years, which I'll get into. So the Dall's porpoises are, again, this really beautiful black and white coloration. And they are a bit bigger, they're chunkier, they're about almost 500 pounds, and their length is about 7 to 8 feet. And they live 15 to 20 years. So what I want you to keep in mind is that most dolphin species live at least 50 years or more. And so these porpoises live a lot shorter lifetime. They usually prefer deeper waters, and they eat a lot of small foraging fish kind of fish like anchovies and herring, hake, and sometimes they'll eat cephalopods, so things like octopus or squid, things like that. The other thing I wanted to point out is the surface. Do you see how splashy these guys are at the surface over here? When they come up, they swoosh through the water really, really fast, so that sometimes you see more water than you do animal. And whereas you look at the harbor porpoise and their surfacing was much more quiet and not nearly as flashy. So the Dall's porpoises, the other thing I like to say is their dorsal fin looks like it was put on backwards. So instead of slanting towards the back, like most dorsal fins do, or being kind of straight up and triangular, theirs slants forward a bit. And you can kind of see that in this picture here. So it's slanting forward instead of backwards. I always find that kind of funny. Now, harbor porpoises, these are, sorry, there we go. These guys are cool because they are the second smallest cetacean in the world. And cetacean means a whale, a dolphin, or a porpoise. They are the second smallest. The only thing that's smaller than they are is the critically endangered vaquita that lives in the Gulf of California. So these guys are only 135 to 170 pounds. So pretty average, kind of an average human weight, and 5.5 feet in length. So quite a bit smaller than the 500-pound, 7 to 8 foot Dall's porpoise. Their lifespan is also fairly short, between 8 to 24 years of age. We don't really know because we don't know a lot about these guys. But they do seem to be much shorter, just like the Dall's porpoises compared to dolphins. So we're still working on figuring out exactly how long they live, but it can be up to 24 years. They generally like to live in more coastal or shallow waters compared to Dall's porpoises, but they also eat a lot of the similar things that Dall's porpoises do. So they eat herring and sand lance and some cephalopods, squid and stuff and whatnot. So they do overlap in what they eat, the two porpoise species we have, but they seem to separate themselves based on habitat. So the Dalls stay in the deeper waters and the harbor porpoises stay in the more shallow waters, even though they eat some of the same things. So what's really interesting is in the Salish Sea, we either have a lot of Dall's porpoises and no harbor porpoises, or the other way around. So in the 50s and 60s, it was harbor porpoises everywhere, rarely saw Dalls. Then it shifted and we saw tons of Dalls. And then by the 1990s, there was pretty much very little harbor porpoises in the area and a ton of Dalls. And now it's swapped back in the early 2000s. Now we have lots of harbor porpoises and very few Dall's porpoises. So for whatever reason, we're not sure exactly why at this point. We don't have both of them in large numbers at any given time. It's one or the other one. So right now we have lots and lots of harbor porpoises to study. So what's one cool thing about porpoises is that they actually have high frequency vocalizations. And so what that means is that they talk much higher than we can hear. So it's kind of like a dog whistle, right? You can blow a dog whistle and you can't hear it, but dogs can. That would be kind of the same thing for porpoises. So we hear in the range of 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz in frequency of the vocals. Harbor porpoises and Dall's porpoises are up closer to 120, 130, 150 kilohertz, very, very high. So until recently, we couldn't really even listen to them until we had the technology to record it. So why? Why do they have these vocalizations? Well, reference back to the mammal-eating orcas that Cindy was talking about earlier. These big guys feed on harbor porpoises and harbor seals. That's their diet. So if you are trying to find, if you're a harbor porpoise, for example, and you're trying to find your own prey, you don't want to be screaming out around so loudly to let your predator know where you are. And so it's a matter of them being able to use their vocalizations to find their prey without giving away their locations to the predator that might come eat them. So it seems to be evolved for that purpose. So they can eat without being heard by their predators. It's pretty smart. So we talked about dolphins being very gregarious and very very social, right? And having a lot of work I did in the Bahamas was about the social structure of dolphins. So are porpoises as social if they're found in smaller groups? That's a very good question. And we don't know the answer to that yet. So harbor porpoises are usually found in groups of only 1 to 3 animals, and Dall's groups are a little bit larger, between 3 and 12. And for both species, we do see large aggregations of 100 or more. For Dall's porpoises, it could get up to the thousands. But for harbor porpoises, it's only between like 100, 200, maybe even 300 sometimes. So they're not uncommon. They're not rare. They're not common, but they're not uncommon. And we're finding that they seem to be more common than I think we've thought in the past. So they're doing these large aggregations. Just because they're in smaller groups, does that mean that they don't have a social structure or they're not social? There's other work that's being done that's showing that they have cooperative feeding, that they have vocalizations that they use for communication rather than just finding prey. So there's more and more evidence that these guys do have some kind of sociality to them or social structure. We just don't know what it is yet. And so that's what we're interested in looking at. So they're social. Other things that they do have the calves. So because they live life in the fast lane, as they like to say, they have a shorter lifespan. In order to keep the population going, you have to have babies more often and earlier. So these guys will give, the first time they give birth is at ages of about 3 to 4, a little bit older for some of the Dall's porpoises, but pretty young. And then they give birth every 1 to 2 years after about 11 months of gestation. So they're pregnant for about 11 months, give birth every year or every other year, depending on the location and the species. And they nurse for less than a year. So it's everything's very quick with these guys. One thing that you can see in the pictures there, you can see the baby in the back. And here you have a baby coming up to breathe. One good way to know that if you've seen a young calf in the water is that the animal will come up and it doesn't have the smooth roll at the surface that the adults do yet. It hasn't figured out how to swim that well. And so they're just making sure they get their whole head out of the water so their blowhole gets out so they can breathe. So they come up and they take their whole head and then they go slap and they slap their chin down. And we call that chin slap breathing. And so basically it's just making sure they get their whole blowhole out of the water so before they learn how to do that nice little smooth roll at the surface. So if you see that kind of chin slap breathing, you know that the calf that you see there is actually pretty young. So one thing for harbor porpoises that we hasn't been done like they do for orcas, right? We know all we know about the orcas is because we know the individuals. We know each individual, how they're related, and their whole family dynamics. And we do know this for a lot of different species, but we haven't done this for harbor porpoises, particularly in the past. It's pretty difficult to do. They're not nearly as obviously marked as other species are. But our work with PacMam is taking photographs and seeing was this possible. And long story short, we can identify individuals by the markings, the pigmentation patterns, the scars, and the dorsal fin markings of the animals. And so this is just a few of the animals that we've learned to identify over the years. And I see you guys see it. There's Ollie. You can also identify Ollie. So it's really cool that we're getting to know the individuals in these populations and understand more about their population because we know who these individuals are. And we have some that we are regulars to our study site that we always get excited when we see. So another thing about harbor porpoises is that they have really small bodies. They live in very cold water and they have a very high metabolism, right? High metabolism means that you're just burning through your energy very quickly. So if you have a high metabolism, you have to eat a lot. So these guys need predictable food sources. And so most of the time we see these animals, or a lot of the time at least, they are foraging, right? They're looking for food. And they're eating these generally small fish, so they have to eat a lot of them in order to keep up their energy. So this is an example of a surface chase where a porpoise is coming up to the surface and skidding through the surface of the water as they're going after a fish, and the wave water comes splashing up on the side. This is another one of my favorite pictures. It's in a harbor porpoise that's coming up under, and the water is just, he hasn't broken the surface tension of the water so that you can see the water draped over it. And he's going after a fish, and you can see in here, you can see the fish has gotten away. Woohoo, the fish lives another day, the poor porpoise, but yay for the fish. Except not always the case. So gulls love to hang around the porpoises and grab the fish if the porpoise doesn't. So they kind of steal the hard work that the porpoises have done to get that fish. So not really cool for the porpoises, but kind of a good idea for the gulls to take advantage of that. Bad for the fish either way. So they usually eat these small forage fish. So the last 50 years of data that we have on harbor porpoises show that they eat just those small fish and squid. But from being out in the field and being out there every a few days a week for the entire year for the last eight or 9 years, we get to see some new behaviors that are happening. And this is the first one that we caught where we saw them catching salmon, and they are not supposed to have eaten salmon from all the diet studies that we know. So these guys, we started seeing this and we're like, that's weird. They're only, remember, the porpoises are only 5 or 5.5 feet, and the salmon can get up to 1.5 to 2 feet long, the adult ones. So they're eating things that are almost almost half as big as they are, which is impressive. And so this was really cool because we realized they may be eating this this new prey item, and then we think, well, why are they doing that, right? So these are the questions that we're trying to figure out now. Is this a new thing? Is this something that's always happened? We just never really see it that often, or is this something new? And then why is it happening? So we talked to our friends in California, and they look at harbor porpoises in the Golden Gate Bridge. And they get to stand on the bridge and they look down, and they have porpoises that come to forage below the bridge, and they also see it. So they're actually eating this other fish called American shad, which is important because it's an invasive species, or one that was introduced actually to the rivers around here. And so that's an interesting dynamic, right? Why are they're eating this species that is not normally supposed to be here, and what are the implications for that? Is that a good or a bad thing for the porpoises? So once, a little bit after we started seeing them start to catch these larger fish, these salmon, we started seeing eagles stealing the fish from the porpoises. This is called Kleptoparasitism. And it's really common in many species, but particularly in birds. And eagles are really well-known kleptoparasites, right? Klepto meaning to steal, and parasitism, parasite, meaning to take from another being. So these guys, we found, are actually taking fish from the porpoises, these salmon, these larger fish that they're now going after. The eagles are like, ooh, that's a great idea. You do the work, I'll steal the fish. So it's the same thing as the gulls, but with a bigger fish and a bigger steal, right? And you can see here, so you can see the fish back here, and then he pulls it up. The porpoise is right there. He's only probably about a couple feet above the porpoise in this, and then he takes the fish away from the poor porpoise that spent all that time trying to grab it. So this is, again, a new behavior that we haven't seen before. And we actually have seen them try to steal from harbor seals. And we have a citizen scientist that sent in pictures of eagles stealing from orcas. They stole some seal meat from orcas. So this might be a new behavior that the eagles are doing that we're looking into of, why is it happening now? And the last thing I wanted to talk about is the fact that harbor porpoises are thought to be, a lot of people think they're not social. They don't play a lot. They don't do a lot of those other behaviors that you really think about when you look at dolphins. And one thing that I like to impart on everybody is that harbor porpoises are not as boring as you think, right? Like, oh, they just bloop over there, and they don't like boats, they don't like to hang around, they don't like bow ride, which they don't wake ride really, but they do these things. They just don't do it maybe as much as other species or as often. But we actually see harbor porpoises wake ride. So this is a wake from a boat, and they're coming up at the surface, and they go down and just ride the wake, just like other dolphins do, but in a different way. So dolphins generally, if you've ever maybe have been on a boat in an area where there were dolphins, they'll jump in the wake and they'll ride the bow with the boat, right? They're going with the boat. But porpoises are like, I don't really like boats, right? I like to be shy. I like to just hang out away from people and away from boats, but I do still want to have fun. So they wait for the boat to go through the Burrows Pass, which is where we study our animals. And once the boat's kind of gone on, they ride the wake as the wake kind of just keeps going, right? So they're riding the wake after the boat is gone instead of following the boat like dolphins do. So I think it's a really important thing to remember for harbor porpoises. And we don't know, Dall's porpoises will actually bow ride some and wake ride more so than harbor porpoises do. So they have a little bit more, maybe more social time. But one thing I want to make sure you guys understand is that these especially harbor porpoises, that's what we study. And to a lot of degree, Dall's porpoises too, we just don't know as much about these animals because they haven't been studied in the past. Other species, Pacific white-sided dolphins, the two types of orcas we have, and even some of the other seals and sea lions have been the focus of more research in the past. And so it's only been recently that we learned these things in the last 10 years because we've been out there and we've actually been directly studying these species. So it's really important is that we have to be out there studying them in order to find out the things we need to understand to be able to help protect them and conserve them. So with that is some of the fun facts I have for you about harbor porpoises. If you guys have any questions, I am happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Cindy. That was fantastic. Hope you guys all learned a lot about porpoises. We do have one question so far in the chat. And if any of you do have questions, feel free to write those in the chat, or we can give you an opportunity to unmute and ask them if you would like to do that instead. But the one that's in chat so far is, do porpoises and dolphins avoid kayakers and stand-up paddleboards, or are they curious?
Thank you for answering what sup was, because I was like, what's up? I don't know.
I had to look it up.
Oh, good. This isn't just me. That's a good question. So dolphins are more curious, I think most species, at least most species are, than porpoises in general. But I wouldn't say that they are, well, it's a good question, because porpoises will avoid boats. Dolphins love boats, or for the most part, aren't afraid of them, at least. Kayakers, I've heard, porpoises come up pretty close to them, but they're not. They're not avoiding them, but they're not going towards them necessarily. They're not coming up and like seeing like, oh, what's that kayak? It's just they're like, oh, that's a kayak. I don't need to run away from it as I might a boat. So I think porpoises are more on that, where they're just like, kayakers are okay. I'm not going to worry about you. But boats, they're going to avoid more so than other species do. Although we do think that here in the Salish Sea, the porpoises are a bit more used to boats than other than in other locations. Dolphins, I don't know about kayakers and dolphins. I mean, dolphins are generally more curious. For the dolphins I swam with in the Bahamas, they were really curious. They'd come right up and be like, what's going on? What are you doing? What's happening? So I think dolphins would be more likely to be curious than porpoises in that matter.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, I see. She says, I've seen them around when kayaking, but they don't seem to approach. So yeah, I think they're pretty much, yeah, they're like, yeah, you're okay. You stay over there.
Oh, we have a question at the Whale Center. Let me go ahead and hand over the microphone here.
Do you like dolphins or porpoises more?
Oh my gosh. That is a really hard question. I don't know if I can answer it. You know, I think I still, wow, that now I'm going to be betraying it. If I say dolphins, I'm betraying with the work that I'm doing now. But if I say porpoises, I'm betraying the work I used to do. You know what? It's really hard, but I like them both. And I guess it's maybe a cop out, but they're so different and they have such different things to tell us. And so the work that I got to do with the dolphins in the Bahamas, like that, it was just amazing. And I, knew all those animals. And it was a different experience than what I get to do here. But here we're learning so much more about porpoises that we've never known. So the excitement of getting to learn these brand new things is just really, really cool. And I learned lots of cool things in the Bahamas too with those dolphins, but it was different, right? So I think maybe porpoises might edge out just because we're learning just such as cool new stuff and so many people don't know about them. So it's a lot of new things that I can share with people, which is really awesome.
Great answer.
Thank you.
It was a long answer, but and maybe not fully an answer, but
Does anybody else have any questions? What I can do is I'll just allow people to unmute themselves if you want to, and just go ahead and ask a question one at a time, if you have any.
Oh, looks like we got another one over here.
Perfect.
is it International Seal Day? Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. I'll just post something.
Favorite kind of dolphin or porpoise?
Oh, what's my favorite kind of dolphin or porpoise? Well, for porpoises, it's definitely going to be the harbor porpoise because I mean, I fell in love with them when we came out here and just getting to learn about them. And we have these individuals now that we know and we see. For dolphins, that's going to be a harder one. I'll probably have to default back to the dolphins that I got to swim with in the Bahamas. They're both spotted and bottlenose dolphins, but I have a special place for bottlenose dolphins because that's what I did my research on, both my bachelor's and my master's and dissertation, my PhD. But the spotted dolphins are they're so much fun. The bottlenose were a little bit more standoffish for various different reasons, but the spotted dolphins would come up and show us their new babies that were born. So just the interactions that I got to do with them probably make them the top one for dolphins.
Thank you.
There is something. Oh,
Any other questions, either from our virtual audience or at the Whale Center? And if you're joining us on Zoom, you should be able to unmute now if you'd like to, and just ask a question if you have one.
and if you're out on the water, if you see something in the water, you're most likely seeing a harbor porpoise. That's kind of the most common thing that you're going to see out in the Salish Sea. Sorry, I'm gonna have to hop off for a second. My husband's calling me 4 times in a row. So
Okay. Okay, Donna said could not unmute. So let me see if I can help you with that, and then we can wait until Cindy pops back on.
You did help me with that. Thank you.
Oh, good.
And as you can tell, ashamedly, I admit I am not a youngster, but I didn't want
All
to pass
ages
this
of
up.
kids are welcome.
So this, you might be able to help with this question, or maybe when Cindy gets back, is, you mentioned that you're starting to see the dolphins and the porpoises eat salmon, or it could be something that they've done all along, but you're noticing it now. Do you see that being any kind of a confliction with the resident orcas that we have competing for the salmon now, if they're starting to do that as opposed to not eating them previously?
Yeah, that is a very good question. Definitely we'll have Cindy answer that when
Yeah.
she comes back on. I'm not sure if I caught which species of salmon that they were eating. So Cindy,
Cool.
I don't know how much
Good.
of that you heard, but there
Yeah,
was a
good
question
question.
about the fact that they're eating salmon, and is that going to conflict with the southern resident orcas? Oh, there we go.
weren't letting me unmute. Yeah, so that's a good question. We don't know the exact species because from the pictures, we can't always tell. We just know it's a salmonid. But the one that we do know is likely a coho salmon. And the other ones that were in our area were pink salmon. So I don't think they're taking Chinook, which is the ones that are more likely, ones that the residents are eating for the most part. So I don't think they're going to be competing with orcas. They may be competing with other species like stellar sea lions or California sea lions or even harbor seals that eat salmon as well. So I don't think it's a problem for the orcas, which is good. They don't need any more competition.
All right, there is a question written in the chat. What are the differences between porpoises and orcas? Are the Dall and harbor porpoises related to or interact with our Puget Sound resident orcas?
Good question. So orcas are actually dolphins. They're in the family Delphinidae. So they are actually a family of one of the species of dolphins. So they are taxonomically different than the porpoises, which are in the family Phocidae. So taxonomically, they are in different families. And do they interact with our Puget Sound resident orcas? Well, that's a good one. Because generally, no. Obviously, so for the big killer whales, the transients, they are prey for those orcas. That's what we talked about in the presentation. But there has been evidence that resident orcas actually will kill some usually calf or neonate harbor porpoises, and they kill them and they play with them and kill them, but they don't eat them. So it's a really interesting one. There's a paper that's either has come out or is going to come out very soon from orca researchers that are document that this has been happening for many, many years. But we don't know why, right? It doesn't make sense that they're doing it and that they're not eating them, right? Because usually that's what's going to happen. So there is interaction that we're not fully we don't fully understand yet. But it doesn't happen. It's one of those things where it's not uncommon, but it's not common either, right? So it's not that they're not doing it all the time, but it does happen that the residents will do that. So always new things to learn with these guys.
That is definitely true. All right, any other questions? And for some reason, it's not allowing you to unmute, even though I tried to tell it to. So if you are wanting to ask a question, you can raise your virtual hand and then I can unmute you and you can ask it. Or do we have anybody else at the Whale Center who has a question?
I think we're out of questions on this end. We're kind of breaking up and doing some stuff at the center and getting people on the activity.
All right. Well, I think we are ready
Awesome.
to start with the activity then, but let's give Cindy a great big thank you for coming and talking to us about porpoises. And Cindy, you are welcome to stay for the activity as well and learn how to tell the difference between a dolphin and a porpoise if you didn't already know that.
Hey, they're going to have a little bit of heads up for that. That's good. I got to go get my daughter out from daycare though. So
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me. And
Thanks
hope you
for
guys see some
joining.
porpoises out there. Yeah, thank you.
Yay.
Bye.
Thank you. All right. So we are on to our activity. And Trevor, were you going to put that up on the screen for our Zoom participants as well, or just there at the Whale Center?
Oh, I will go ahead and share my screen and we'll get it up there.
Okay. So hopefully you all got this by email as well. I know Katie sent this out, so hopefully you all have a copy of it, but this is a fun activity that Trevor put together. to see if you remember the differences between dolphins and porpoises that Cindy went over. So there's the activity. So if you don't have a copy of it in front of you, you can just look at it on the screen. We can do it that way. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. So we're going to give you just a couple minutes to look through this. And basically what you're going to do is match. So you're going to match, you know, which one has a rounded mouth, which one has a longer mouth. Is it a dolphin or a porpoise? Which one has a curved dorsal fin? Which one is shy? Which one is active? So just kind of take a look at that and do your matching, and then we'll go through it in a few minutes. And I assume you're all doing this already at the Whale Center as well.
Sending out snacks right now. I could.
So again, we'll give everybody a few minutes to kind of look through this. Maybe when you're done and you're ready, you can just put a little thumbs up. All right, so again, when you're ready, you can go ahead and use your virtual thumbs up under reactions. If you don't know where that is, if you go to more, click on those three little dots and go to reactions, you should have an option to do a thumbs up, or you can put it in chat if you would like. And once we get a lot of thumbs up and know that people are ready, we'll go through it. Eric's ready. Okay, yes, if you do have to leave now, no problem. We will have the recording that we will send out to everybody, and we can also send the activity to you as well. So if you would like, you can go ahead and email Katie. So katie@orcanetwork.org, just to make sure we have your email address, and we can make sure that you get those. All right. Well, let's go ahead and go through this, and we can kind of do it as we're talking about it as well. For those who haven't had a chance to finish it, we can just do that now. So the first one, and I'm going to see if I can figure out how to unmute all of you. I don't know why that wasn't working before, but this way you can call out the answers if you want to. All right, well, for some reason it isn't working, just raise your hand maybe if you want to answer it, and then I can make sure to unmute you. So the first one is the rounded mouth. Which one has a rounded mouth? Is it the dolphin or the porpoise? Or you can just write it in chat if you want to, if you don't want to say it out loud. Is it the dolphin or the porpoise? You can either raise your hand or put it in chat. All right, so if you said porpoise, you are correct. They do have a more rounded mouth. Good job. What about the longer mouth? The longer mouth belongs to, obviously, the other one, the dolphin. Good job. All right, the next one is the streamlined body versus the stout body. So which do you think is which? Does the dolphin have the streamlined body or the stout body? And if you don't know what that means exactly, streamlined means they're kind of more long and lean and sleek. And the stout body is more kind of rounded. So how many of you think that the porpoise has the streamlined body? How many of you think the porpoise has the stout body? Yeah, so the porpoise has the stout body. You can see it's a little bit more rounded. Dolphins are a lot more streamlined, so they can move more quickly through the water. All right, and then with the dorsal fins, which one has the triangle dorsal fin and which one has the curved dorsal fin? So take a look at that picture. If you can't remember exactly what Cindy said about that, which one looks a little bit more curved to you? Is it the dolphin or the porpoise that has the curved? Yeah, I see it in chat. That is correct. The dolphin has the curved, and you can see the porpoise has more of the triangle dorsal fin. Good job. And then the other one is on behavior. So one of these two is shy and elusive, and they kind of live in small families. The other one is really active and acrobatic, and they're in big groups. So which do you think is which? Which one do you think is shy? Is it the dolphin or the porpoise? See a couple people put that in chat. All right, I see a couple of them in chat. Good job. The dolphins are in big groups and they're active and they're acrobatic. If you remember, like Cindy said, sometimes those dolphins would come up to her and show her their babies, whereas the porpoises tend to be a lot more shy. They don't like to be around boats. They don't like to be around people very much, and they tend to be in smaller groups, smaller families. So there you go. Those are the differences between dolphins and porpoises. Thank you so much, Trevor, for putting this activity together. How did you do over there at the Whale Center?
Oh, I'm sorry there, Cindy. Didn't quite catch you. I think we're finishing up on the activity now. Yeah, it looks like everyone did a great job based on the answers I'm seeing over there. Yeah, they did awesome.
Yeah, they got it all. All right, is there anything else from the Whale Center before we say goodbye to everyone?
Oh, let me check in real quickly. Oh, we have a question.
All right.
What's your favorite kind of whale?
Who is the question for? Is that for me?
Yes. I
My
asked you
favorite.
when you came to our school, but I forgot.
My favorite kind of whale, well, it's a tie. So, and when I came to the school, I talked about two different kinds of whales, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was there yesterday talking about orcas, and a month ago, do you remember what I was talking about then?
Gray whales.
Gray whales, yeah. So orcas and gray whales are both my favorites for very different reasons. And next month for our youth event, we are actually going to be talking about gray whales. And we're going to be doing a virtual whale watch. So you'll get to see lots of video of gray whales and learn about their behaviors and see moms and babies and some of our local gray whales. So that one's going to be really fun. And I can't exactly remember the date on that one. Trevor, Katie, what is the date of the next youth event?
It's going to be April 12th.
April 12th. Excellent.
Are you gonna
So
come back
yes,
to our school?
pardon me?
Are you gonna come back to our school?
I would love to come back to your school. I don't think we have anything scheduled just yet, but I would be happy to do that at some point.
We will be waiting.
All right.
Thank you, Cindy.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Does anybody have any other questions? Oh, I see that there's one in chat. Are there porpoises in Russia? Oh, that is a very, very good question, Eric. I will have to ask Cindy that. I believe there are, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'll have to ask Cindy that and get back to you. Great question. All right, well, we'll go ahead and let you guys go, and we look forward to seeing you next month for a virtual whale watch with gray whales. Thanks everybody for joining us, and thanks everybody at the Whale Center. Thanks, Trevor, for putting all this together with the technology. It worked great.
No problem.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.